Schneider Weiss Original Tap 7.
And remember, life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Banned Bikes and Booze Reviews. I've got one here today that I always go on about when I'm drinking Weiss beer, and I've never reviewed it. And I've drank it loads of times. For me, it is the benchmark for every German Weiss beer out there, and any Bavarian style Weiss beer, doesn't matter where it's brewed. For me, this is the benchmark. Now, it's got a very, very close competitor in Weihenstephaner. I think their Weiss beer is absolutely superb. The Dunkel Weiss is out of this world that they do. However, I think the Schneider Weiss has just shaded it by a couple of millimetres, because for me, this is the best Weiss beer you'll ever taste. Now, I don't normally do this when I'm reviewing beer. I'll give you a clue as to what's in the beer, and I'll find out what it tastes like when I review it. But I've had this loads of times. If you look at the profile picture on the channel, you'll see quite a few of these bottle stem or bottle necks on that picture, along with the Iyengar Dunkel. That was in a German bar just round the corner from where I used to work, which used to do a fantastic range of German beer, the Altbayerisch Dunkel being one of them, and this being the other. Those two, get that out, were my regulars, along with the Augustiner that they did. It was called Hermann the German. I kid you not, that's what it was called. And they were actually a German food and beer chain, or a German themed bar chain. But whoever did the buy-in of the beer for that lot, they really knew what they were doing, because it was the best of the best. They used to do an alt beer there, Slurcher alt beer, which is really nice. They did the Augustiner, they did the Rothaus Pils, and they did Rothaus Weizen, which of course, Rothaus, very, very underrated German brewer. But they also did this, and they did quite a few of their range. Now, I've tried more or less everything from Schneider Weiss. Not everything, but more or less. I've put more or less everything on the channel, but I haven't put the original tap number 7. If you look on the side of the bottle, they have tap numbers on there. Each one denotes a different style of Weiss beer. And a subscriber pointed out that I hadn't reviewed it, so here I am about to review it. I'll just give you a quick rundown of the brewery. You shouldn't really need to, because it's gone over in detail in all the others, but this lot, they revived the wheat beer style. George Schneider, back in the 1800s, 1872 to be precise, he was granted license to brew wheat beer again, because back then in 1872, that was just after the Franco-Prussian War, Bavaria was still a state. Germany wasn't properly unified, and Bavaria was still a state. So after that, before that, all the brewing was done by state breweries. George Schneider said, "How about I do some wheat beer?" And it was originally the Wittelbach family that had taken it over. They didn't originally take it over. They were the ones who were brewing it. Wittelbach, of course, being the royal family of Bavaria, and they got license from them to brew this stuff. And George Schneider and Son has been doing that ever since, and they have been doing an absolutely sterling job of it since then. They, of course, are based in Bavaria, and it's been based there since they started in 1872, and it's given rise to the style. Now, I know I keep going on about this being the benchmark, but for me, this is the best wheat beer on the market, in my opinion. Certainly German wheat beer. Of course, Belgian wheat beer is different, but for German Weizen, this is the best. Right, it is a 500ml bottle. It is 5.4%. This is the Tap 7. It's the original. This is what you would expect to find when you have a German wheat beer, or Bavarian wheat beer in particular. The ingredients, of course, conform to the Reinheitsgebot, wheat being allowed into the brewing process. That was given a special rise to do that. All the flavour, Reinheitsgebot, you know my views on that. It doesn't really mean much now. It's more of a marketing gimmick, if truth be told. But of course, Weissbier, it's all about the yeast. And Weissbier is naturally cloudy because they leave the yeast sediment in there. And that's what gives it its lovely banana and clove flavours. And there's obviously various strains of yeast. The hop content in here, it's minimal. Usually I think this lot use Hercules. But yeah, everything else is sort of immaterial. Well, I wouldn't say immaterial, but it's not. It's flavour-wise, it's all about the yeast. So with that in mind, let's get it open and let's see what's going on. Right, this is cold. It has come out of the fridge. That is the way, in my opinion, it should be drunk. It is a very nice summer drink, very nice, very refreshing. Not as light bodies as lager, obviously, because the wheat gives it quite a strong body on it, or full body, I should say. There it is, Tap 7, Schneider Weiss. I've also got some of the Fest beer in the fridge. I'll be reviewing that soon, so watch this space for that one. And go me with my Schneider Weiss glass. Now, it's very unusual for me to drink beer out of the original brewer's glass, but here I am. Now, you just agitate the yeast on that a little bit more. Get that in there. Don't roll it across the table like a certain Arsenal supporting beer reviewer does. Why would you do that? Now, the aromas already are absolutely huge. Now, can you see that? That's a very dark coloured wheat beer. Normally you would get wheat beer and it would be ranging from this colour. I would say this, without being a Dunkelweizen, this is probably the darkest wheat beer you will see, and it ranges in colour to, well, from this colour all the way through orange, yellow, and more or less white in some rare occasions, a yellowish white. Usually they ain't great. Right, it's quite evident I'm not going to get all of that in there, so there's a little dreg at the bottom, but I've got most of it in there anyway. There it is in the glass. Look at it. That is the perfect German wheat beer on the nose. Just masses of lovely banana, sweet banana, clove, little bit of them bubblegum esters. No coriander, as some reviewers like to say. I mean, if they're getting coriander, that's fine, but I've never got it. There's no coriander in there, so I don't know where the coriander's coming from that they rave on about. Maybe they're getting their Belgian and German wheat beers mixed up, which Belgian stuff does contain coriander, of course. But that's really nice. I mean, it's the perfect wheat beer. You will not go wrong with that. So, without further ado, let's get it down my fat Gregory Peck. Bottoms up. Oh, that is fucking handsome. It really is. Now I'm just going to pour what was left of that in there. Get all that yeasty goodness. Now, if you watch my reviews, you'll know that there's quite a few wheat beer reviews on there. You need to get all the yeast in there. If you don't, you're not going to get the full flavour of the beer, because that's where all the flavour is, in the yeast. So I've just got the last dregs out of there, poured it into there. Let's go again. That's just perfect for me. It's the perfect balance of banana, clove, bubblegum sweetness, and just nice clove esters on the finish. It's absolutely perfect. You will see in other German wheat beers there'll be an emphasis more on certain elements. So, for example, you will get quite sweet bubblegum esters off the Einsiedler Weizen. You will get a lot of, well, I wouldn't say a lot, but you'll get a slightly more sour note on the cheaper German Weizens. That's where the yeast isn't really up to it, so it gives it a little bit of a sour note. Don't get me wrong, it can be quite nice. If you want to see that in action, just get the Lidl Patronus or the Lidl wheat beer, which is really nice. For the money, you will not fucking go wrong with that. But it just can't hold a candle to this. In fact, no German Weizen or wheat beer, aside from Weihenstephaner, even comes close to this, in my opinion. Oh, it's just perfect. It is the perfect balance. It's got everything that you would want from a German wheat beer. Perfectly balanced, lovely mouthfeel. There's just nothing wrong with it. I cannot fault it. There's no, well, certainly no nasties in there. It's just the best. You will not go wrong with Schneider Weiss. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some very good German wheat beers out there. Very good indeed. As I just mentioned, the Rothaus wheat beer is very nice. There are some very good wheat beers from Bavaria. If you want a standard run-of-the-mill wheat beer, Franziskaner, which is quite widely available over here, it's pretty good. I mean, it's certainly not the best, but it's okay, it's passable. Erdinger, fuck off, don't get me ranting and raving about that shit. What else? The Big Six, the Paulaner wheat beer, absolutely gorgeous. That's available in Morrison's at the moment. You've got the Augustiner wheat beer, again very nice. Löwenbräu do a wheat beer. Kronbacher, I mean, they all do. It's a standard German style. But in my opinion, this lot, they specialise in wheat beer. That's all they do. Every connotation of wheat beer, Weizenbock, Dunkelweiss, your average run-of-the-mill tap number 7, they do an extra hoppy wheat beer, which is okay, it's not bad. The Fest beer, in my opinion, is absolutely superb. I've got some of that in there, but it's a Fest Weizen, which means it's brewed for the Oktoberfests. And this lot, not being around Munich, they have to put on their own. They are a wheat beer brewer. They specialise in wheat. They buck the trend. They don't brew a Marzen. They brew wheat beer for their Oktoberfest, and that Fest Marzen is very nice, and I've got that in the fridge. I may review that next after this. This stuff is lovely though. Oh, it's just so moreish. Look at the colour. That is the sign of a really good wheat beer. It's dark. That is dark for a wheat beer. It's not a Dunkel. Dunkel would be a lot darker than this. But yeah, it's just perfect in my opinion. You will not go wrong with it. So finally, reviewing tap number 7, original Weiss beer from Schneider Weiss. What's the verdict? It doesn't get better than this. That is the verdict. It's perfect. It's the top of the tree. And yes, I've mentioned Weihenstephaner, and don't get me wrong, that stuff is absolutely amazing stuff as well. And it's just millimetres behind this, but I think this lot just shade it. Because for me, this is the perfect wheat beer. Everything else is just a poor, well, I won't say a poor imitation, but an imitation of this. And I urge any craft brewer who is attempting to brew a Bavarian style wheat beer, and believe me, I've tried some absolute fucking abominations, attempts at wheat beers. Who's that? Is it More Brewery? They do one called Claudia. That's a wheat beer. Oh, fucking disgusting stuff. I don't know what the hell drugs they was on when they brewed that. I'll tell you who do a good one. Old Dairy, they do a Bavarian style wheat beer, and they had it on tap down in a craft brew pub in Maidstone, and it was absolutely gorgeous. Sadly, it was a one-off. They're not going to do any more of it. Well, certainly not a regular, which I think is an absolute shame because that was brilliant. Sam Smith's do a good one as well, the organic wheat beer, but they don't come close to this. If you want the best, this is it. So needless to say, this is going to get a 10 out of 10. And when I say at the end of every video, beer is working class champagne, I actually got that from a Schneider Weiss video. They interviewed some random German boy who was drinking a wheat beer, an old boy, and he said, this is the poor people's champagne. So I thought I'd do a little bit of a theme on it and just call it working class champagne, but it really is. That is perfect. 10 out of 10. The best wheat beer you'll ever try, believe me. And remember, it's poor people's champagne.